Ladies and gentlemen, prepare your mana crystals and brace for impact. Because we are about to dive into the epic, the thrilling, the absolutely jaw-dropping complete life story of a legend who redefined darkness itself, Beru, the Black Shadow King. This is a tale of monstrous evolution and royal destiny, told in the heart-pounding style of Korean anime. Imagine, if you will, the absolute silence before the Big Bang. Not a peaceful silence, but a void, an absence so profound it feels like a weight. This is not the silence of nothingness, but the silence of potential, a universe waiting for its first command. Now, shrink that concept down, from the cosmic scale to the dungeon deep. Place it in the lowest, most light-forsaken chamber of a place so saturated with mana and malice that the very air is thick with the ghosts of 1,000 devoured souls. This is the crucible of shadows, the womb of our protagonist, and it is here that our story truly begins, not with a bang, but with a single, flickering thought in an ocean of dark. He was, for all intents and purposes, a mob, a low-tier, common-grade, easily disposable monster. His form was not the terrifying, chitin-armored juggernaut we know today. It was a wisp, a patch of deeper darkness that seemed to drink the scant light from the glowing moss on the cavern walls. He had no name, no purpose, no higher consciousness. His entire world was a binary loop of two primal directives: consume and avoid being consumed. He would drift through the lower corridors, a silent phantom, absorbing the residual negative emotions left by fallen adventurers, their fear, their despair, their rage. This was his sustenance. He was a scavenger of sentiment, a bottom feeder in the ecosystem of evil. This is the foundational tragedy and the ultimate relatability of Beru's origin. In the world of Korean anime and webtoons, we are so often introduced to the Chosen One, the reincarnated Grandmaster, the player who knows the game's secrets. But Beru, he was the NPC. He was the environment. He had no cheat skills, no hidden potential waiting for a wise old mentor to unlock. His existence was a testament to the sheer, indifferent randomness of the universe. He was a single line of code in a program of unimaginable complexity, a line that was never meant to be anything more. His days, if such a concept could be applied to a timeless being, were a monotonous cycle. He would feel the psychic echo of a party's failure several levels above, a sharp, delicious spike of terror, and he would float towards it, a silent shark drawn to blood in the water. He would feast on the emotional fallout, growing marginally denser, marginally more aware. Then, he would sense the approach of a larger predator, another shadow, a cave leech, a spectral wraith, and his entire being would scream with the instinct to flee. He was not a fighter, he was a fugitive. He existed in the spaces between the bigger threats, a master of hiding in plain sight, of making himself so insignificant that he was not worth the energy to devour. This was the unassuming beginning. This was the quiet, unremarkable world. It wasn't a peaceful village with cherry blossoms, it was a hellscape where he was at the very bottom of the food chain. His ordinary life was a constant, desperate struggle for the most meager form of survival. He didn't dream of being a king because the concept of king did not exist for him. His ambition stretched only to the next morsel of fear, the next safe crevice to hide in. Yet, within this seemingly meaningless existence, the seeds of greatness were being sown, though they were buried deep. What was it that made Beru different from the millions of other shadow wisps that formed and dissipated in the dungeon's depths? It was a tiny, almost imperceptible spark, not of light, but of a different kind of darkness. While other shadows merely absorbed emotion, Beru, on some fundamental level, processed it. He didn't just consume fear, he learned from its texture. He began to distinguish between the sharp, acrid fear of a novice and the cold, resigned terror of a veteran. He started to recognize the flavor of rage, of betrayal, of sorrow. This was his first, unconscious education. He was a student in the University of Suffering, and every soul that perished in the dungeon was a lesson plan. He learned the geography of his prison not just as a map of safe routes, but as a tactical landscape. He knew which corridors echoed with the footsteps of heavy armored warriors, which chambers were favored by agile dagger users, and which dead ends often became tombs for overconfident mages. This knowledge wasn't used for ambition, it was used for survival. But the database was being built. The neural network of a future general was being wired, one traumatic experience at a time. The first major turning point in this pre-destiny life was likely an encounter with a creature several tiers above him, a shadow stalker, perhaps. Before this, Beru had only fled. But this time, cornered, with the chilling aura of the stalker pressing in, something new flickered within him. It wasn't courage, as we understand it. It was a calculated, desperate aggression. He didn't just cower, he lashed out. He didn't have powerful attacks, so he did the only thing he could. He focused his entire being, all the condensed despair and fear he had consumed, into a single, psychic shriek. It was a weaponized expression of his own existence, insignificant, pathetic, but sharp and unexpected. The larger shadow recoiled, not out of injury, but out of surprise. This was not in the script. The slime was not supposed to fight back. In that moment of stunned hesitation, Beru did not press an attack he didn't have. He escaped. He fled faster and farther than ever before. But the event left a mark on him deeper than any physical wound. A new concept had been introduced into his binary existence: initiative. He had acted, not just reacted. The outcome of the encounter was still flight, but the method had changed. He had used his environment, his own accumulated essence, as a tool. This cycle repeated itself, over centuries, or perhaps millennia. Dungeons operate on a timescale incomprehensible to humans. Each near-death experience, each successful consumption of a particularly potent emotion, each tiny act of defiance, added a single grain of sand to the foundation of what he would become. He grew, not just in size, his wispy form gaining substance, becoming a swirling, man-sized vortex of darkness. But he grew in awareness. The primal directives of consume and flee began to be joined by others: observe, analyze, wait. He became a ghost in the machine of the dungeon, a silent witness to the endless drama of hubris and downfall that played out within its stone walls. He saw hunting parties work in flawless synergy, and he saw them shatter under the pressure of greed and fear. He learned the patterns of adventurers, their strengths, and, more importantly, their crippling weaknesses. He understood that the heavily armored knight was often the last to die, watching his companions fall first. He learned that the flashy, powerful mage in the back was often the most vulnerable once their mana shield was depleted. He was accumulating a doctorate-level understanding of combat psychology, all from the perspective of the potential victim. This was Beru's ordinary world, a world of constant, low-grade terror, of fleeting sustenance, of silent, unseen growth. He was the ultimate background character, living a life of quiet desperation in the literal shadows. There was no prophecy about him, no destiny calling his name. He was simply there, a product of his environment, shaped by its relentless pressures, learning its brutal rules better than any other creature within it. He was, without knowing it, in the final moments of his prologue. The spark of consciousness within him had been fanned from a dying ember into a steady, cold flame. The database of knowledge was vast. The body, while not yet regal, was no longer that of a mere wisp. He was a shadow with substance, a scavenger with a burgeoning intellect, a slave to instinct who had just begun to experiment with the concept of will. He was poised on the precipice, utterly unaware that the world he knew, the world of hiding and scavenging, was about to be utterly annihilated. The catalyst for change was coming. It would not be a gentle nudge or a wise mentor's guidance. It would be an earthquake. It would be a sun being born in the heart of his dark universe. It would be the arrival of a sovereign whose mere presence would demand that Beru evolve or be erased. But that is a story for the next episode. For now, we must sit with the image of this forgotten, nascent shadow, waiting in the silence, his incredible, royal destiny, the best kept secret in the entire dungeon, hidden even from himself. Imagine our shadow, Beru, no longer a mere wisp but a creature of substance, a silent scholar of the dungeon's dark arts. His world, while treacherous, was predictable. It operated on a brutal, but understandable set of rules: the strong devour the weak. He had become adept at navigating this hierarchy, a master of survival in a world of monsters. But in the grand, cinematic tradition of Korean anime, true evolution never comes from comfort, it is forged in the heart of a cataclysm. For Beru, the comfortable horror of his existence was about to be shattered by an presence so monumental, it redefined reality itself. This was not the arrival of just another powerful hunter or a legendary beast. This was something the dungeon's ecosystem had no reference for. It began not as a sound, but as a shift in pressure, a tectonic realignment of the very mana in the air. The walls, which had echoed with the screams of the dying for eons, began to hum with a different frequency, one of absolute, unquestionable authority. This was the dungeon break within Beru's own soul, the system notification that overrode his entire purpose. The great monarch, the future Sung Jin-Woo, had entered the depths. To the other dungeon creatures, this presence was a threat, a source of pure, unadulterated terror. They reacted as they always had, with mindless, feral aggression. They surged towards this new power, a tsunami of claws and fangs, only to be met with an annihilation so swift and effortless it was less a battle and more a natural phenomenon. Beru, the consummate survivor, did not join the charge. He did what he did best. He became one with the darkness, he hid, and he witnessed. And what he saw broke the very core of his understanding. He saw his world's apex predators, the shadow stalkers and spectral licks he had spent a lifetime fleeing from, being erased from existence with a casual wave of a hand. The power gap was not a chasm, it was the gap between a doodle on a napkin and the Sistine Chapel ceiling. It was incomprehensible. This was the catalyst. This was the event that shattered the glass ceiling of his potential. In that moment, his two primal directives, consume and avoid being consumed, collapsed into a single, terrifying, and illuminating imperative, submit or be nullified. But this was not a simple act of cowardice. This was the most intelligent, calculated decision of his life. His entire existence had been a masterclass in assessing power, and the being before him was power incarnate. The instinct to fight was overridden by the profound, evolutionary need to adapt. To evolve from a creature of the dungeon into a soldier of this new regime. The moment of his arise was not a moment of defeat, it was the moment of his true birth. It was the ultimate plot twist in his personal story, the callback to every near-death experience, every scrap of knowledge he had ever hoarded. All of it had been preparation for this single, defining choice, to kneel. And in that kneeling, the old Beru, the shadow scavenger, was executed. The process of being remade into a soldier of the shadow monarch was agonizing. It was his training arc, compressed into a single, excruciating moment of cosmic reconstruction. His form was shattered and rebuilt, not just bigger, but better. His intelligence, once used for hiding and scavenging, was sharpened into a weapon of strategic thought. His will to live was reforged into a will to serve, to protect, and to conquer in the name of his sovereign. He was no longer a background character, he was being drafted as the right hand of the main protagonist. The catalyst did not just give him power, it gave him a purpose that stretched beyond the next meal, beyond the next hiding spot. It gave him a king to serve, a legion to command, and a universe of battles to fight. His quiet, desperate life was over. The epic of the Black Shadow King had officially begun. The evolution from a shadowy foot soldier to the revered Black Shadow King was not a simple promotion, it was a revolution of identity, a narrative arc worthy of the most shocking Korean webtoon plot twists. Initially, Beru's strength was a direct, terrifying extension of his sovereign's will. He was the ultimate weapon, a being of pure, destructive loyalty. His early battles were spectacles of raw power, a blur of chitinous limbs and overwhelming force that crushed everything in its path. He was the nightmare made manifest, the final boss that other S-ranked hunters would have nightmares about. But this was merely the foundation. The true construction of a king was just beginning. The crucible for his sovereignty was not a single battle, but the accumulation of them. It was in the relentless campaign against the Monarchs and their legions that Beru's strategic mind, a relic from his millennia of survival, truly awoke. He was no longer just following orders, he was interpreting them. He began to anticipate enemy tactics, to deploy his fellow shadows not as a mindless horde, but as a coordinated military force. He understood flanking maneuvers, feints, and strategic retreats. This was the first crack in the facade of the mindless monster. The Shadow Monarch had given him power, but Beru himself forged that power into a razor-sharp intellect. He became a grand general, and an army without a brilliant general is just a mob. However, the most profound element of his transformation, the one that truly cemented his royal status, was the development of his unwavering code of honor. This was the ultimate paradox, a creature born of darkness and fear, developing a deeper sense of loyalty and principle than most heroes. This was not programmed into him, it was learned. It was learned through his absolute devotion to his sovereign. He saw in Jin-Woo a power that was not corrupt, but protective. A strength that was used not for mindless domination, but for the preservation of something greater. Beru internalized this completely. His loyalty became the core of his being, a sacred oath written in his very soul. This fierce loyalty then extended outwards, defining his rule. A true king does not rule through fear alone, he inspires devotion. Beru became the unyielding shield for his shadow sovereign and the entire human world Jin-Woo sought to protect. He commanded the respect of his fellow shadows not by being the strongest, though he was, but by being the most dependable, the most cunning, and the most fiercely protective. He was the first into the breach and the last to leave. He would strategize not for his own glory, but for the absolute victory of his monarch's cause. His infamous, desperate battle against the monarch of transforms was not a display of mindless aggression. It was a calculated, sacrificial holding action, a stalling tactic born of a brilliant tactical mind and a heart of absolute loyalty. In that moment, he was no longer a monster. He was a knight, a guardian, a king defending his realm. Thus, the title of Black Shadow King became not a statement of species, but a definition of his role. He was the absolute authority within the Shadow Army, the right hand of a god, a ruler who commanded through a terrifying combination of unmatched power, genius-level intellect, and an unbreakable code of honor learned from his master. He proved that a crown is not forged in fire, but in the choices one makes in the heat of battle, to lead, to protect, and to serve a cause greater than oneself. The legacy of Beru, the Black Shadow King, is not etched in stone or sung in grand ballads by bards. It is woven into the very fabric of what it means to be a hero in a world where the lines between monster and savior are beautifully, brilliantly blurred. His complete story is a masterclass in subverting expectations, a theme so central to the best Korean anime. He forces us to re-examine our most deeply held narratives about power, origin, and destiny. His journey from the absolute lowest tier of existence to the right hand of a god is the ultimate underdog story, but with a dark, thrilling twist. The underdog never had to become a good guy, in the traditional sense to become a legend. His legacy, first and foremost, is one of potential. Beru is living proof that origin is not destiny. He was not born with a silver spoon or a divine blessing, he was born from the residue of fear and despair in a forgotten pit. He had no special bloodline, no reincarnation cheat code. His entire being was a testament to the raw, unadulterated power of will. Every ounce of strength, every brilliant strategy, every ounce of his fierce loyalty was earned. He was not chosen, he chose. He chose to survive when survival seemed impossible. He chose to evolve when faced with an existence that demanded it. He chose to serve with absolute devotion when presented with a master worthy of his fealty. His story screams to every overlooked background character, every mob, in their own life, your beginning does not define your end. The power to write your own story lies not in where you start, but in the choices you make at every single, desperate crossroad. Furthermore, his legacy redefines the very nature of power. In a genre saturated with protagonists who gain strength to fulfill personal revenge or achieve personal glory, Beru's power found its ultimate expression in service and protection. His incredible might, his genius intellect, none of it was for self-aggrandizement. It was all channeled into a single, noble purpose, to be the unbreakable shield for his sovereign and the world his sovereign cherished. This transforms him from a mere powerful entity into a truly noble one. He demonstrates that the most terrifying force in the universe is not mindless destruction, but power harnessed by a will that is loyal, protective, and fiercely intelligent. He is the guardian in the guise of a monster, the ultimate weapon with a heart, proving that true strength is measured not by what you can destroy, but by what you are willing to protect with every fiber of your being. Finally, his legacy is one of inspiration. Beru's tale did not end with his own ascension. The most powerful legacies are those that create a ripple effect, that inspire others to rise. As the Marshal of the Shadow Army, he became the standard to which every other shadow aspired. His unwavering loyalty set the cultural tone for the entire legion. His strength became their strength. His cunning became their battle doctrine. He was the king who lifted his entire people up with him, transforming a ravenous horde of monsters into a disciplined, loyal army of guardians. He is the shadow that cast a long, protective shade, allowing others to grow in his wake. In the end, the complete life story of Beru teaches us that a legacy is not about the light you are born into, but the light you create from your own darkness. He is the embodiment of the idea that even a creature forged in the deepest, most hopeless pit can ascend to become a king, and in doing so, become a beacon of hope for all who feel they are starting from nothing. His legacy is a permanent reminder that the most epic stories are often hidden in the most unlikely of heroes.